Bentornati! Welcome back to CDDA Dark Changes Ahead, the show in which we take a look at this past week changelog and discuss the ramifications in terms of gameplay, game design, general development practice and stuff like that. I would like to remind you that there's also another show, probably a better show about this, from the Murder Unicorn. He actually jumps in game with the latest experimental and tries to demonstrate practically what happens. What I do instead is I try to get a look in what could happen in the future with the things that are changing right now. Let me remind you that I love CDDA. I also love all these people that contribute. I'm just a developer that tries to give feedback and spark some thought because I believe in the power of constructive criticism. I'll try my best to always be constructive. Please don't be mad. I assure you, I promise you, it comes from a good place. So let's start taking a look. The changelog between October 16 and October 23. Also, since this is today, be mindful of the fact that it will be partial of October 23. Let's jump to the important stuff, which is, here we go, the merged pull requests. It means code that actually got into the experimental branch. Of course, we start from the bottom, because this will be the oldest, 7 days ago. Let's first try and do a very quick list of the changes, and then I'll choose some of the more interesting ones to discuss more in depth. Added a recipe to practice throwing. You can practice your throwing skills pretty easily with a baseball or something. Good thing that there is a screenshot in here, because then we know that or something for user Anglonias means basketball, beach volleyball, or volleyball. That's the or something. Track NPC storable volume when trading. Looks like this is actually a bug fix and fixes the fact that NPC no longer have 0 liter of storage volume when trading. So it seems there was this bug where NPCs would always have 0 volume capacity in their inventory no matter how many backpacks you gave them. And that also made it impossible to complete trades. And apparently this would fix exactly this bug. Fixed the anti-glare compensator. The bug was that the anti-glare compensator CBM was not working with the acetylene torch. It should have worked as a replacement for welding goggles. Apparently this now fixes it. Add in monsters and various JSON for portal storms. Okay, there's very minimal information here. It says that it's part of this, add new weather type portal storms. We will take a look into this more in detail later in the second part of the show. Fix a typo. This all looks like things that don't have an immediate impact in game. Battery acid is only in lead acid batteries. Okay, this will make it so that only the car batteries can be disassembled for acid and not other batteries. For example, alkaline or carbon zinc batteries should not contain acid anymore. Add looks like to some Magicalism weapon. Oh, I see. So this tag is used in combination with tile sets so that those weapons or armors can be represented with specific tiles. So, I don't know, magic sword blah 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 looks like broadsword and it's rendered as a broadsword in your tile set of choice. That's really clever, I think, as a solution. Hacksaw bar cutting. So the bug was hacksaws can't saw metal bars on broken windows, whereas they work correctly on unbroken windows. And this apparently now fixes that. Also makes it so that you can use the acetylene torches. Remove loaded gun from display item group. Very minimal information here, but apparently a loaded gun was appearing in the menu for loading bullets, ? And this removes the mistake. Add new weather type, portal storms. Add new weather type, portal storms, give weather some teeth, add new kinds of challenges that scale with time to help extend endgame. Okay, this is very interesting. I will not get into much details right now. Let's get back to this, maybe as the first topic of the second part of the show. Martial Arts Balance Update, Leopard Kung Fu. Several upcoming changes to martial arts systems, etc. This is also pretty extensive. Wow, we are gonna have a beefy second part of the show apparently. Blind characters without eyes. Okay, so this makes it so if you lose your eyes for whatever reason, which I think currently would only be because of mutations, you also become blind. And then if you regain your eyes, it says in here, for example, because you drink some purifier and so you regain your normal eyes, then you get sight again. You regain this vision score. It is interesting. What I don't know is if this has some unforeseen impact. For example, maybe if you mutated into something that doesn't have eyes, maybe that type of creature would inherit some other form of sense that unfortunately the game can only translate into sight. For example, if you have like very strong tremor sense or echolocation, the game can only translate that into visible tiles. It's interesting. It's definitely going into the direction of having limbs with functions, and if you lose that limb, you lose the function. So it's an interesting path to go through that very closely reminds me of Dwarf Fortress. Yeah, but I don't know if this has right now unforeseen consequences. Add spell to the list of tile set IDs. Okay, spells can now have sprites. I think this mostly is interesting to the people that play Magicalism, but I guess spells in general are whatever effects is not a standard gun or a standard ranged weapon. So I think this can also affect vanilla game. Update Magic Academy's roof. I think this is also Magicalism. Okay, this is now the roof of the Magic Academy. Traders ignore e-cash. I am able to sell e-cash to any trader. Make traders ignore cash cards. Add trader avoid flag. Cash cards no longer show up in the trading menu. Some people in here are interjecting the fact that cash cards would be useful to traders just as much as they are useful to you, the player, for interacting with vending machines and gas pumps. The reply in here is that sure, but the value would not be the same, which I guess it's reasonable. Which brings in actually... okay, let's talk about this later, but the fact is, every item is currently priced in dollars, and it's priced compared to what the pre-Cataclysm price would have been. So this discussion is way larger than this. If you want to give a game like this an economy, you need to have a very large discussion of what those currencies might be and how do people would assign value to items. Anyway, use ellipsis character consistently. What is this? Makes every instance of ... the same. No spaces before, only one space after, and this character does not end a sentence. As to why I chose these arbitrary rules, they are the most common in the current data. And looks like everybody is pretty okay with this. I don't think anybody had any qualm with the use of ellipses before this, but, you know, consistency. It's okay, I'm in favor of consistency. Whatever the rule you chose. Which, by the way, I don't think it's incorrect. Seasonal sound effects. Sound effects can now be season specific. I actually really like this addition. I think in a game like CDDA, that doesn't really have like stuff like animation, we can do a lot with sound. So yeah, now we can have spring, summer, autumn and winter specific sound effects. Add a new diagonal movement with mod plus arrow keys option diagonal lock. Okay, so this looks like a way to be able to move in the standard 8 directions without having necessarily to use the numpad. So if you only use the 4 arrow keys, which only have the cardinal directions, and you want to reliably move diagonally, where if you hold down Control or Shift, that locks movement in diagonal only. So if you wanted to move diagonally, let's say, you press and hold Shift, and then you do up and right, and that reliably results in a diagonal. Because when Shift is pressed, you can't really move in any orthogonal direction. You can only move diagonal. Add post-damage absorption enchantments. Adds a new post-damage absorption enchantment for each type. They're calculated after damage is mitigated by armor and natural absorption. And this apparently JSONizes, so it means it makes it configurable, stuff like the traits Light Bones and Hollow Bones. So for example, when a monster deals exactly 10 bash damage, the damage with Light Bones went to 14 and with Hollow Bones went to 18. Okay, it is good that stuff like this can be configured in a JSON file rather than being hard-coded. For those of you that don't know programming, hard-coded means there's my code, my actual, maybe C++ code, and I have stuff like, I don't know, +4 or +40% as a number, like buried really deep in the code. That's not good, that's not effective, because if I change my mind or I change what that trait means slightly, I have to go and find that +40% and tweak it and make it become something else. If instead my code reads a configuration file that says this is a trait, with this trait is associated a post-damage absorption of +40% bash, and that works also for all the other kinds of damage, then you know where to go and change stuff, basically. You don't even have to access the code of the game to change that. Unload containers into tile key. Is this what I think it is? Drop contents of a container inside the player inventory into an adjacent tile. Does not recursively drop contents due to item location limitations. Currently can only drop item inside the player inventory, wielded or wearing. Add the new menu for dropping items into a tile. Wait. Repurposes the D key since it's essentially capital D +5. No, that's not the right way to think, dude. Like, okay, maybe it's not that ubiquitous in CDDA as in other games, but normally you have lower key is just do the standard thing, and capital key do the advanced version of that. If you instead make it have that like a totally different behavior, that's gonna be confusing. Like D stands for drop. The standard would be I drop something in my own position, like directly on the ground. Capital D plus something, means, okay, I want to be more specific, I dropped directly behind me or directly to my left. Like repurposing the lowercase d key is not a choice you make like that. And in fact, people complained on Reddit apparently. Revert removal of drop keybind. Thank you, my friend. Add effect, add remove scheduling. Okay, this seems pretty in-depth, but it's a thing like you start with a specific effect and you want to say that after that effect, after a specific amount of time, there's also another effect that needs to be applied. Like for example, you get volume, but then you are downed after that. So it seems like there's now the ability to explicitly schedule stuff like that. Base Camp Workshop number 2 Glassblower Rest of construction materials, okay. Vacuum sealer manual. I like this kind of thinking. So it says that if you find this manual, you get this recipe that is very easy. Because even if you're not a very experienced cook, and maybe you never used a vacuum sealer yourself, you find the manual, you're not illiterate, you read the manual, now you can operate the vacuum sealer. I think this should be extended to a lot of things, honestly. Fix a crash on load, fix a harvest bug. Let's quickly take a look at this. Okay, this fixes various bugs with crashes while loading characters. It's okay, let's not get too much into the details because you may or may not have encountered those. Fixed unexaminable crops for harvest. Crops were inconsistently harvestable because the examine function wasn't properly checked for these fields. This was a bug introduced by my previous change. Okay, good thing that you are fixing your own stuff. Fix hot plate down to a reasonable size. Change hot plate volume from 5 liter to 2 liters. Current hot plate size doesn't make much sense and creates weird situation with tools that use hot plate as a component, taking up less volume, chemistry set as an example. Okay. At first I was, okay, dude, you're like selecting one specific model or hot plate for you. Maybe the person that previously worked on this was thinking of a very big hot plate. But then he says, well, if you incorporate the hot plate in something else, like a chemistry set that now includes the hot plate, and the chemistry set itself is less than 5 liter, then it doesn't make sense, and I salute the way you're thinking. That's really reasonable, I think. Draw fields based on intensity. Drawn fields now use field intensity. What do you mean by field? Oh, I think I get it. So fields would be the internal terminology for things like blood and gore splatters on the ground, liquids dumped on the ground, maybe even electricity and stuff like that. These things have an intrinsic intensity, but that wasn't necessarily usable with the visual representation. So this should make it possible, for example, to draw a different tile based on how intense the gore is on that tile. And look at this, there is also a representation. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. Revert removal of drop keybind, we already discussed this. Updated the blacksmithing standard to add files. Added files to the blacksmithing toolset. Forging without files, you wouldn't be able to sharpen a blade or clean any scale off of a work. Change the blacksmithing standard to include files. Okay. I love these commit messages. Update toolsets.json. Do as Kevin says. And then added files to the item groups. Yeah, you gotta do as Kevin says, my friend. There's no way around it. You gotta do as Kevin says. Add wheat-free options for flour, bread, and sandwiches. Love that, cause yours truly can't really have gluten. I mean, I have my own opinion on how the cooking system should work, and I'm gonna expand on this on the second part of the show. Martial arts update, Leopard Kung Fu. This relates to the other stuff of martial arts rebalance. Preliminary portal labs. Add a preliminary portal lab location using the mutable microlabs. Okay, we're shedding more and more lights on this mutable. Make more interesting dungeons using mutable specials and design something that can help replace the old hard-coded portal labs. One of the 3 wings of the recently added mutable microlab will now be occupied by distorted lab terrains. These are horrible, senseless places full of murderous nether monsters and teleport traps, but also great places to find random artifacts. Fortunately, the place spawns completely sealed off from the rest of the lab and you have to deliberately break in. Also added a pair of new animate object nether monsters such as Structural Spur and Shrapnel Swarm, made from distorted pieces of the actual microlab structure, both to sell the illusion of reality breaking down within the lab and to serve as obstacles within the distorted hallways. Also includes a new activity suit, an ominously named Zedra hazmat suit. This one is identical to the Hub 01 environmental suit. So there you go. This is brand new content for the new modular labs. I don't know why we call them modular outside of PRs, but they are mutable in here. I guess because mutable is the name of the class they use in the code itself. Fix lighting things on fire. That is of interest to me because I am playing with a girl that likes fire. Lighting a candle with a matchbook doesn't consume any matches. Okay, that makes sense. Smoking rack doesn't appear to use charges of fire starting item. Example, matches. Okay, I guess that's a fix. Allow NPCs to toggle on power armor and other things during combat. In one way, this looks fantastic. On another note, don't give your NPCs stuff that, when turned on, could be extremely deadly. Rebalancing mosquitoes to better resemble their senses. Remove mosquitoes' hearing and expands their sight range. To make mosquitoes feel more realistic, I hate realistic. You should say believable to the player, as well as make them more threatening at night. IRL mosquitoes don't react to man-made noises, but are able to detect carbon dioxide and heat produced by mammals, which this PR seeks to emulate with changes made. Removes here tag from mosquitoes and changes their night sight and day sight to 12. Yeah, as of late we have people that really love insects. Games with Friends Part 2. Now you can play something with your friends. You and your two friends play on your handheld game systems for a while. Rocky Sierra won. I kind of like this. And I like it because it seems like it's going in the direction in which I would go when it comes to NPCs. It's a cataclysm. Most people have been turned into mindless monsters. I think there should be some kind of sanity mechanic, maybe just something that ties in into your long-term morale. If you do get the ability to be around people, that should impact your mental health, I think. So I kind of like where this is going. Updated 2x sword to require cordage or duct tape to craft. Balance, the 2x sword magically makes sticks fit together. Okay, I guess it kind of makes sense. If the recipe wants 2 sticks, then you need those 2 sticks to stay together in some way. So this would be the solution to this bug. Players can know the positions of monsters even when they shouldn't, and then, because if you move the cursor around until you see change monster name appear, this thing. I didn't even know that exploit existed. But I guess it's gone now and we can't use it. Integrate Exodii shop stock with late game armor redesign first wave. Add some new parts to Nomad armor, adds a great deal to the Exodii shop. This is going to be extensive, I think. Maybe we'll look at it later. Magicalism, fix wolf sheed cufflinks. I bet you know what that means, because I don't. Increase length allowance for condoms. The length allowance for condoms, I found it's too short for me in general, so... No, it's for waterproofing. Okay, that was a very long list. Took a very long time to go through it. Now, second part of the show. Let's go back and look at the most interesting things that we can discuss. Okay, first we have the portal storms. Now, this, I think, has the potential to be a big change for the entire game going forward. What is a portal storm? Essentially is a weather type. It's like a storm, but it's a portal storm. It's not necessarily a weather that spawns portals as we know them already in game, but it is described as an event that relates to the structure of reality collapsing and maybe our universe starting to merge with other universes, and so you see strange things, you see reality starting to break, and you see strange enemies starting to appear. Also, the author says that they should be flash storms, so things that start and end in a really short time span. Also, their intended behavior is that they should start very light with very minor effects, more on the nuisance side, and then as game progresses they should get more and more deadly. As I was saying, this has the potential to become possibly one of the main features of the game, and I say this because if you think about it, this is really in line with what already happens to the zombies. So it's the blob evolving in the way they use, for example, human or animal tissue to conquer our reality, basically. And that aspect of the game becomes more and more deadly as the game progresses, as represented by zombie evolution. This portal storm stuff, with the storms that get more and more severe with time, reinforce this idea that no matter how successful you are as a survivor, no matter how good you are, this universe is doomed. Earth is doomed. This reality will end. So this is more like a question of how long can you survive? What do you want to do as the end approaches? But eventually, any game will end. Now, this also has a potential depending on how it is balanced. So, for example, how many months or how many years will it take eventually to reach a portal storm that just cannot be survived, right? This will in turn have impacts on other systems. Long-term base building or farming, this is not a content addition. This is a game design choice that I think the contributors at large are all agreeing with. And I think this will contribute to more clearly define the character of this game. Okay, so portal storms, let's keep an eye out for this. What are other details? I already read all of this, but it looks like, at least at first, if you stay indoors during the storm, you will not be affected, at least while the storms are not very severe. And for now, we only have the mild version, by the way. So currently added monsters that can spawn during the storms are a Wraith, small, quick, low HP and harmless. All they do is make you need to sleep a little more, but they can combine with the Impossible shape that has a ranged attack that make you unhappy and make you have nightmares, which reduce how refreshing the sleep is. So the Wraith makes you need to sleep more, and the Impossible shape makes you have a nightmare while you sleep. Then there's this gigantic appendage, which is like, I don't know, something like gigantic finger or something like that, and you're not supposed to try to kill it, but just avoid it. Stuff like this, people might say, okay, but what's the point, right? If I don't have to kill it, if I don't get loot, what's the point? Well, the point is to give a character to this game, which otherwise it's becoming, let me remind you, a big bloated hodgepodge of monster combinations. I don't like that. When you introduce too many variations and when you introduce too many combinations, it's like, so let's say you get this cup of gelato and you get hazelnut, chocolate, and banana. And what you do is you take your spoon and just mix it all together. Yes, it's still ice cream, but it becomes a slurry. And what was the point of having the 3 flavors in the first place? Doesn't make any sense anymore, right? So, big thumbs up from me for the Portal Storms. Ramza 13, you're going in a good direction. Okay, now let's take a more in-depth look to this martial arts balance update, the Leopard Kung Fu. So, the author says that the Leopard Kung Fu is supposed to be the fast version of the Tiger Kung Fu, all offense using speed and little defense. It didn't feel like it was good originally. This is supposed to be the original spread of moves. And now we can take a look at the new one. Let's see. So the first thing you get is the dexterity now determines the bonus bash damage instead of strength. So immediately very strongly characterized towards using dexterity. So don't take strength if you want to go Leopard. Take dex because that makes your attacks stronger. Also, Leopard's ambush, static buff, your critical hit chance equal to dexterity. Then you get rapid, then you get 30% bash damage, and minus 20% move cost. As you might have guessed, I'm not an expert on using martial arts in CDDA. If you are, you probably understand this way better than me. Important changes focused on critical hits. Yes, we understand that. Dexterity boosts the chance of crit by a lot, and the rapid techniques and feint exist solely to give you more chances to crit. Fast critical hits. Nearly all your crits have some sort of speed bonus attached to them. You can hit a lot and overwhelm your opponent. Sounds like fun? Critical hit reliance. You don't have much in the way of defense and you need critical hits to win fights. If you can't crit, you're going to be in trouble. Furthermore, there isn't too much in the way of bonus damage. You need Leopard Pounce for the big enemies, and if you can't break through with that technique, you're not going to win. Okay. Strong, again, strong direction towards dex and speed. Gameplay, you're really quick, but you need critical hits to be effective. So you should increase dexterity as much as possible. Take enemies one at a time. Weak enemies should be easy, but stronger enemy could be a problem. If you're not doing enough damage, you switch to a different style or continue a fight, etc, etc. So, again, if you know your way around the martial arts, this probably makes a lot of sense to you. Let's move into the other Lizard Kung Fu technique. Again, I think this is the current. The author says, I am proud that I made Lizard Kung Fu into a working style with the rebalance, but without the counters it needs improved to make up for its wall gimmick. Okay, how did you rebalance? Accuracy and block effectiveness. Accuracy, dodge, and block effectiveness if you're near a wall. Rapidity, plus 20% damage. On pause buff, so I guess if you are near a wall and you don't move, you get plus 10% damage. This instead is on move, you get a plus 2 dodge skill and plus 10% critical hit chance. Then you get grab a break, an armor crit attack, plus 150% damage, knockback distance, knockback spread, stun duration, must be near a wall. Important changes. So walls make you better, I think we got that. In the new version, walls are still important, but you are not helpless without one. The goal is to make sure the style still offers something to the player even without walls. Because, I mean, if you want to use this, you need to be in a city, practically. You will be missing half your buff and your best technique without a wall, but you can still fight back reasonably well. New on-pause buffs. Pausing will boost your damage, even more so near a wall. These buffs have a good duration and only need to be used once in a while. Gameplay. Whenever possible, fight near a wall. Walls give you more defense and more damage. Take a moment, pause every once in a while to gain a big damage boost. Lizard Wall Dive presents a choice to the player. You can either follow the enemy to finish them off with Lizard's Leap and lose your wall buff, or stay near your wall to keep your buffs and gain your strong on-move buff. Okay, I like that there is somebody that is putting this amount of thought into these martial arts, which are, by the way, something that you don't necessarily need. You can have a totally different gameplay. I would love if there was somebody doing the same level of game design thinking, for example, for guns. Vormitrax constantly reminds people that when you have a rifle, all you have to do is press F and press P, press F and press P. That's all you need to do. As long as you're not surrounded, you're not overwhelmed, that's the gameplay. Everything else doesn't really matter. Or if it matters, it's such a small percent increase or decrease that in the end, it's a waste of time. The only thing you need to decide is the range at which you want to start firing. I want to see people start making this kind of thinking when it comes to normal melee and gunplay. Anyway, let's move on. I want to briefly come back to this thing of traders ignore eCash and the economy system. So what I was saying earlier is that currently, when you go to a trader, the trader says, I consider this bra worth $1.05. First of all, I think, in order to make any amount of sense in the scope or in the lore of the Cataclysm, I don't think you can still think in terms of dollars. The dollar is a type of currency, just like any other currency currently in use in our real world, that relates to existing economies. Economy changes, the value of a dollar changes. During a cataclysm, the value of a dollar bill is probably like none. In CDDA, we're already going that route with the faction-specific currency. I think we should expand on that. I think when you start bartering or trading with a specific person, a specific NPC that is a member of a specific faction, they should give you prices, for example, in mercs or in Hub 01 coins and stuff like that. Then, true, a cash card still has a value, because if you find a working vending machine, you can use that cash. However, that value must closely relate to what you can get out of that. Vending machines are not that ubiquitous. They are few, far in between, and nobody replenishes them. So I think it's already a miracle to find stocked vending machines. Anyway, let's go ahead. Okay, let's talk about cooking and recipes. I was trying to talk about this a little bit earlier, but I thought let's remove the considerations from the first half of the show and talk about it more right now. So there's this tendency in having very specific recipes in the game, and that leads to having hundreds and hundreds of recipes for stuff that does more or less the same. Now, I'm not opposed to have in the game a bajillion different ingredients, okay? I'm happy to have the acorns and the buckwheat and the wheat and the rice and the corn, all the possible grains and all the vegetables and all the types of meats, etc, etc, etc. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is recipes. That since there is a wheat bread, then I need to add a new recipe for buckwheat bread, then I need to add another recipes for cattail flour bread, and then one for rice bread, and so on and so forth. And then when there's cattails bread, then I need to add a new recipes, because you know, in some parts of the world there is such a thing as a cattail bread sandwich that usually people put very specific things in it. That I don't like. That I don't like because in terms of gameplay, it's just bloat on the crafting menu. What I would like to see instead is cooking recipes become more generic. And what I mean is there could be one recipe for flatbread, okay? The recipe for flatbread would require water and a bread making flour. Then bread making flour could be either a list or a tag, whatever you want to implement that, and you are free to say and change in time which edible materials constitute bread making flour. Then you could have just a second recipe to say that this other bread is the fluffy bread, there's probably a better term to say that, and the recipe includes some kind of yeast. And you can say that this requires water, some kind of bread making flour, and some kind of yeast. And you can have a list of yeasts, a list of flours, etc., etc. Then you only need like one recipe for example, for boring sandwich. And you define boring sandwich as anything that is made with a bread, which would be just a category that includes both flat bread and full bread, and maybe stuff like crackers, and crackers would be a type of flat bread, I think, probably. And then one ingredient in there among a couple of categories, I don't know, a sauce or a vegetable. And then in-game, when you want to make a sandwich, you see that you can make a boring sandwich with either crackers or rice bread or cattails flatbread, and you can put in there either pickles or, I don't know, fresh onion or mayo, and that is still a boring sandwich. Already the nutrients are calculated based on what ingredients you used, so that would not be a problem at all. When it comes to joy, I understand that's one of the things that for some people are very, very difficult to accept. That I may like something that you don't, and I may not like something that you do. I think the most elegant solution for something like this would be to, well, maybe decide a spread of values. Like decide, okay, sauces, when eat on their own, would create a joy between this value and that value. And when at character creation, okay, you randomly decide how much this specific character likes something, for example, like onions. And it's up to you to discover. The first time you make a boring sandwich with onions, you find that upon eating gives you plus 12 joy, and you discover, oh my, apparently I really like fresh onions. I never knew, I never tried. Because right now it's super bloated. Like the crafting menu is almost impossible to use, and the amount of joy you get from food, well, it's arbitrary. So, again, these are just my thoughts. Anyway, I have nothing against this PR in particular. In fact, having more wheat-free options hits me in a soft spot, because I can't have gluten in my diet. So, good job. I just wished for a system that reorganizes. Yeah, see what I mean? See what I mean? This is more clutter. I want to see a PR that reduces this list instead of making it longer. Anyway. Okay, let's look a little bit more in depth into this. Allow NPCs to toggle on power armor and other things. So now objects can have this combat toggleable tag, and what happens is that when entering combat in method of attack, this checks for all items the NPC is wearing that contains this tag, combat toggleable. This then checks to see if the item can be transformed, if the item uses UPS, then whether or not the user has sufficient UPS charge. If all the checks pass, then This means that the NPC automatically decides to activate it. This follows the same entry point where defensive CBMs are activated in anticipation of combat. So I guess this could be also applied to something like a retractable baton, for example, if it has the combat toggleable and corresponds to the desired method of attack, or, well, doesn't use UPS charges, so I guess the NPC would automatically activate and expand the combat baton in anticipation of combat. When the NPC no longer detects any present danger, it deactivates all active items that are transformable and have the tag combat toggleable. This point is at the same place where the combat CBMs are disabled. So I guess this system was already in place for CBMs because, well, CBMs are already either active or passive, so there probably were already entry points in the code for that thing specifically. With regards to JSON, this only adds the tag to power armor. So this guy made the code and added the tag to power armor, but it remains to other people or other PRs to add the same tag to other stuff, like the combat chainsaw, for example. Okay, in described alternatives you've considered, the author says, an alternative would have been to add an option to discuss how NPCs should use combat items, similar to CBMs. Unlike CBMs, however, you can easily remove items from NPCs, so if you don't want your follower using an item, then it should be given to them uncharged or not at all. This would add a lot of pipeline and of options for little gain. I don't think so, actually. I strongly disagree. For example, if you have enough power armors, let's say, to give to all your followers, right? There might be situations in which you just don't want power armors to be used. Okay? So having an option to say, hey guys, let's not use power armors for a while. And then again, guys, let's now use power armors in combat. I think that would have been a very valid way to play. So I understand this would add a lot of pipelining, so means a lot of code, okay? Needs to be added. Also because you need to store that kind of info on the NPC itself, right? But I don't agree the little gain aspect of it. For example, let's say that there's an item that when activated, let's think, for example, the 5-point anchor suit. When you go into a lab, you want to tell everybody, people, let's remember to activate the 5-point anchor whenever we initiate combat in the lab, because we're not going in the lab. Whereas if you don't go in the lab, then you say, people will not use the 5-point anchor now. So yeah, this last sentence I don't really agree with. And last but not least, we get to this PR about integrating Exodii shop stock with late game armor redesign first wave. It says that this is part of a larger process to rebalance late game armors and to increase the utility of the Exodii store. So we have the Nomad armor additions and changes. Adds a new underlayer to the Nomad armor and adjusts stats of the old Nomad armor to be a jumpsuit instead. Makes the Nomad armor a little different to craft, and instead of being auto-learned, blueprints are purchased from the Exodii store. For now this makes Nomad armor kinda suck, but soon that will be an advantage compared to having to figure it out yourself. Nomad gear will be less protective overall than Survivor gear, but will be less encumbering with more storage. An individual piece of Nomad gear should have more use than a single piece of Survivor armor, through various activation functions, but Survivor armor will have more pieces that can be switched around for different functions. Okay, so this is like long-term decisions of what's the Nomad gear, what's the Survivor gear, etc, etc. And these are changes to the Exodii shop. More carefully vets initial stock to include some useful stuff, guns, and stuff and ammo. Adds a few pieces of new Thessalonian cataphract armor based on Byzantine armor. These are high-end medieval suits of armor made of bronze. Okay, it's a lore thing, because this is stuff brought by the Exodii from their own dimension, where the Thessalonian Empire rules. And this will also be the chance for some odd conversations. Okay. Adds nomad armor blueprints to the shop. When a blueprint is selected to be part of the shop stock, Rubik will also dredge up some stuff from storage that might be used to craft it. Okay. This kind of makes sense. All of this. What it still doesn't make sense is this part of armor. This. I mean, not in relation to the cataphract armor itself. Now, if you didn't see my first installment of this show, I went on in a little bit of a rant about this kind of change. This would be stuff like, okay, now we have coverage, but then we have also melee effectiveness, ranged effectiveness, and vitals coverage. Okay, I need actually to bring up good old paint to explain myself. You are this guy, right? And you have vitals. You have your head is a vital, your neck is a vital, your central torso, it's a vital, your groin is a vital. Well, you could argue that also your guts are a vital. Okay? So there's definitely some spots that you want to protect. Think about what is armor. Armor is usually a hard cap or a helmet of some sort. Armor is usually something like a chest piece or a full body armor like Roman style. Now take a look at this drawing for a second. I think I could also zoom this a little bit more for you. Do you notice anything? Actually, let me do something like this so you understand it better. Armor is already designed to protect your vitals. This is something that humanity understood pretty well from the dawn of time. The only case in which you don't see this happening, let me do another example, is this example. Where instead you see armor take more or less this shape. Okay? However, let me point out one thing. This kind of armor never existed throughout history. You know why? Because it doesn't make sense. Because your heart is more or less in here. Okay? Also, your face is in here. And your neck is in here. And your lungs are in here. Right? But you know, saying armor, stuff that people would recognize as armor, already makes sense from this point of view. So, coverage for an armor, right? Let's say that this is just the chest piece, right? In terms of coverage, just the chest piece. You want to say that this is coverage 65%. Well, guess what? This is 65% effective at covering your vitals, because your vitals are in the middle here. Okay? If it was 90% coverage, it means that it also has these layers. Well, guess what? This armor, compared to the previous one, is 90% effective at covering your vitals. A full friggin' helm like this is like 99% effective at covering your noggin, which is a vital spot. Okay? We currently don't have like the neck portion too much, but you can imagine maybe this helm going like this. Okay, there you go. 99% effectiveness in covering your vitals. So having coverage and vitals separate doesn't make any sense. Also, going down the route of how effective is against melee or ranged is not that great. We already have damage types for that. Having something of more coverage against melee or more coverage against ranged is a very complicated way to go down, and also not really effective in making any distinction, because let me show you. This is a melee weapon. It's called a maul. You don't see this too much historically, but you can imagine this, or maybe this, okay? A simple mace. It's got this impact area, okay? Any armor is pretty good at covering from this impact area. I'm gonna show you another melee weapon. This is a rapier. It's got this impact area. It's still melee. Now the game already makes a distinction between these. This is bash damage, this is piercing damage, and already piercing has the armor piercing ability to represent the fact that the chance of penetrating armor is much higher. It doesn't make sense to add more stuff on top. This thing, over-engineering, what you need to do is you have to, 1, use what you already have and rebalance it. For example, instead of saying this is piercing and piercing is, well, armor piercing by sheer magic, you could go ahead and say, okay, this weapon has a minimum impact area of this value. Then the only thing you need is to add to your armor some sort of value that represents how large the seams are, okay? So for example, an armor made like this, well, the seams are, we take another color, the seams are this large, okay? And you compare this value with this value, and you get your armor penetration effect. You instead have armor that looks more like this. And in here, the seams are extremely small, like this. You compare this value for the seams with this value for minimum impact area, and etc, etc. This doesn't go anywhere. And it's also just slapped, layered on top of existing systems, and there's no way going forward to predict what's gonna happen. Okay, I'm done with the rant, and I'm done with the entire thing for this week. I hope you find this useful. I hope you're not hating me too much. I'm trying to be constructive. I know I've been a little bit harsh, so I'm sorry about that. I still love you. I love the game. I love your contribution. I just want to see this game going in a good direction, you know? I want it to see grow in a good way. And there's already a lot to love in this week's changelog. That said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next episode. Alla prossima!